one exception we are going to make across this podcast, unlike our other podcast, is whatever we say, whatever opinion we give, we are going to back it up with data that has been sourced externally from Bloomberg, FT, a lot of it's coming from Twitter, charts and graphics, and that is what we'll base our opinion on. I don't want to get into this, mental gymnastics. Anyone just use that phrase कि भाई हम ओपिनियन दे रहे हैं तो शायद ऐसा ही हो. I'm just showing you the data and that is how it's going to be. So let's start first. You have the folder accessible to you?
या तू मेरे को बता कौन सा फाइल खोलनी है, I'll open that.
ठीक है. Let's start with the एक second, let me also open it. The one which has the title of sorry, Trump's tariff origin.
Trump's
Let's
tariff
take out
origin.
huh,
Yeah, opening it right now. All right, putting it up on the screen.
yeah.
Mhm. There you go.
So let's address the first question. What is the origin of these tariffs? This is from Info and Data, as the logo says. Now, a lot of people have been running this rumor, especially from the Congress, and Pawan Khera was running this rumor कि हमारे टाइम तो 2.4% था effective average tariff, इनके टाइम तो 18% हो गया है. Now, this is the global average tariff on US imports from 1975 to 2025. Okay. And it shows some very important milestones there. But if you look at 2019, it's not until the first and the second Trump presidency come along that you actually see a full blown tariff war happening. So when someone says that India ka effective rate to 2.4% tha, which also aligns with the global effective tariff on US imports, it wasn't a Congress thing. Let's get this out of the way. It was there as recently as 2023. Now, currently, the effective average tariff on US imports is 14.5%. So this was a very important point to be addressed. That 2.4% is not a Congress era thing. It's just a pre-Trump and a post-Trump phenomena. Now we are at 14.5%. Okay, you can sort of cut this out.
All right.
अभी एक है चाइना के ट्रेड सरप्लस वाला. ठीक है. Now, the second reason why Trump is actually going for a tariff war is because the US has $1 trillion trade deficit with the world, whereas the Chinese have $1 trillion trade surplus with the world, 1.2 trillion in 2025, and it's gone from nearly a couple of 200 odd billion in 1995 to 1.2 trillion in 2025. That is what manufacturing does to your economy. If you start manufacturing at the right time, this is what happens to economy. Now look at this graph. It's from the Financial Times. The US trade deficit with the world is 980 to $1 trillion. 980 billion to 1 trillion. China has a surplus of $1.2 trillion. So even if you go back to the first Trump presidency, his entire tariff war, his entire trade wars was focused on the Chinese. And that is why you had companies like Apple and a lot of companies that manufacture for the US in China, or the Wall Street lobby for China. They were advocating for the tariff war, for the trade war to be eased out. So please understand, China and America are on two opposite spectrums of the trade deficit and surplus equation. Okay, we can do away with this.
All right.
And now
Putting up one.
India's trading करके India's trading वो है sorry, not India's
Partners.
trading. No, tariff stacking up.
Okay, tariff stacking up. Got it. Opening it up right now. Here you go.
Now, this is what the current situation looks like. We have gone from 50% to 18%. The effective 25% on China, on Russian crude, it was removed. So that cut down the whole thing from 50 to 25, then you another tariff hit, so we are at 18%. So compare it with the United Kingdom and the EU, which have got their deals with the United States, but compare it with Pakistan, Indonesia, Malaysia. I say Pakistan because a lot of commentators in India were mocking this government, saying that, oh, you have lost out to Pakistan and see Munir's diplomacy has worked and all that stuff. But India today has an effective tariff rate at 18%. Now, this is something very, very important. A lot of people have confused 18% with the final effective tariff that would be on Indian exports to the US. 18% is the number we start our negotiations with. When we say a trade agreement has been reached, there is just an interim agreement. Item by item, quota by quota, discussions will be held, negotiations will be held. So people do not need to confuse two numbers. First is that 2.4% we discussed, that was not a Congress rate, that was an effective import rate. And the other one is 18%. 18% is where our negotiations begin. Eventually, the effective final tariff on Indian goods, on Indian imports to the US, factoring in all our imports to the US, would be far lesser, and that holds true for every country. That's about it.
All right.
Now, which part you want to discuss first? Do you want to discuss crude first or agriculture first?
Let's do crude.
Let's do crude. So you have India's crude pivot. You can, or India's energy autonomy. कोई भी उनमें से एक खोल लो. India's
Um,
energy autonomy is pretty good.
how India? अबे साले इतने सारे हैं. हाँ, मिल गया.
Kushal will kill me after the podcast.
यार इतने सारे, मैं ही पागल हो गया.
भाई फिर डेटा जरूरी है ना, क्या करें अभी? कोई मानता ही नहीं है वैसे, फिर ओपिनियन लगता है सबको.
नहीं नहीं, आईटी सेल है तू.
हाँ, इसको ऐसे ही रहने दे. आई मीन फेसेस कैन बी विजिबल सो दैट यू कैन सेव सम लैग टाइम. सो
हम्म.
पीपल हैव बीन कंफ्यूजिंग कि हमारा रशियन क्रूड लेने का मौका गया तो अपन का सॉवरेनिटी चला गया, ऑटोनॉमी चला गया, स्ट्रेटेजिक डिसीजन मेकिंग चला गया, वी हैव सरेंडर आवर इंटरेस्ट. Please understand, the pink part is what the Russian crude was. 2022 से पहले it factored in nowhere. In fact, majority of our, crude imports was either Iraq, it was Saudi Arabia, it was UAE partially, then some of it was US, and then there were other resources, making up for the combined 2.13 million barrels. And this is an average consumption of 5 million barrels a day. That is how much we consume. What changed in Feb 2022? The Russia-Ukraine war began. And that is when the Russians gave out uh, their crude was sanctioned in the West. The West was idiotic enough to invite double digit inflation upon themselves. We were not. Our budget factored in for $75 a barrel. The Russians were selling it to us far cheaply, and we bought it. And we bought it humongously. अब किसी ने कल मुझे कहा कि भाई रशिया बेच भी रहा था तो उनपे वेस्ट ने एक प्राइस कैप लगाया था. दे हैड अ प्राइस कैप. Again, please understand, our crude purchases are not dictated by any personality cult. It's not that we suddenly fell in love with Vladimir Putin when he started the Ukraine war and we started to import more crude from him. It's not like we are sort of going to, or at least even think about lessening our crude imports from the Russians because somehow we want to appease Donald Trump. That is not how it works. Believe me, the top office of this government, it only focuses on price. That is their only motivation when it comes to evaluating their crude imports. Who are they going to purchase it from? Simply put, in Feb 22, the government had a simple option. Do they align with the West and say, okay, we are going to have a double digit inflation on the energy front? We are coming out of COVID. कोई बात नहीं, लॉजिस्टिक्स महंगा होने दो, मैन्युफैक्चरिंग महंगी होने दो, सर्विसेज महंगा होने दो, सब महंगा होने दो, बट वी हैव टू अलाइन विद द वेस्ट. और do we stick to our guns? We import from the Russians and we ensure inflation doesn't touch our borders. We went for the latter option. And that is what I'm telling everyone who's saying that we won't import from Russia ever again. If an externality as big as the Russia Ukraine war arises, when there is a problem of crude pricing, it may go as high as $150 a barrel. We will look at the best price before us. Price is the only factor that moves us. And this is what Nirmala Sitaraman confirmed in 2023. This is what Jay Shankar confirmed in 2023. No government in this country, absolutely no government in this country, will prioritize the interest of Trump over inflation. That is not how it works. You can also open up the second graphic, which gives people another fairer idea about the percentages. This is about the volume.
which is
Because
name.
the India's crude pivot.
Got it. कर रहा हूँ.
Now you look at, that's okay. We went from having Russia as zero, literally 0% of our crude on a daily basis to almost 40%. It peaked at around 40%. What do you think drove that decision? It was price. The Americans had a price cap on the Russians that you cannot sell below above $60 a barrel because it may sort of finance your war or whatever it is. But we were importing. Now look at that pink stretch. That is what changed after Jan 22. Now, this is for the people who think the government cannot do it. The government has already disproven your theory. And also, remember, when this import began in Jan 22, Feb 22, March 22, a lot of Congresses, what they said, you are financing Vladimir Putin's war. You are.
they, they had said something opposite, then they say something else now. That is the fun.
हाँ
मैंने
हाँ
पवन कह रहा कि tweet
हाँ
देखे.
that you have blood on your hands. The composition of this country was not aligned with us importing oil from Russia. So what has changed today? Okay,
But
what
to be
has the
fair, I think if BJP was the opposition, their behavior would be very similar. But anyways, that's besides the point.
but we have to look at the government that is there. I mean, in all fairness, that is what we have. And then there is the final graph that is from Bloomberg, which is called India's oil changes. Because if data from 2019 is not enough, let me show you data from 2013, and this is directly from Bloomberg.
Mm-hmm. Logi.
Now this
Yeah.
is a 10-year, huh? This is 10 years, last rather 12 years of how our oil importers have changed. There was no gray in 2013, 14, 15, 16, 17, 18, 19, 20. In 22, above the pink, a gray stretch emerges. That's the Russian Federation. And that is how our oil imports have changed. It's that simple. It's pricing that drives the decision. But one thing else is also happening right now in the world. There is an oil glut. Usually, our problem is that we have less of oil, but right now we have more of oil. And that is evident in all the data points that are coming up. If you look at some graphics of Russian crude at sea, uh, there is a lot of crude that is being held up in tankers all over the world, and it's lying at sea. So there is a lot of movement of Russian crude, and it's as high as 140 million barrels in January 2026. Compared to the last year, when it was less than 60 million barrels, there is more than 140, 150 million barrels of Russian oil at sea. So you have to understand right now what we are looking at is an oil glut in the world. So probably at this time you may have people who might change their importers, who they want to really buy from, but it doesn't mean that we have given up a strategic autonomy. I hope this data really helps. Number two, the last graphic I want to show in this regard is the Russia oil discount.
Okay.
When we started importing in 2022, there was a huge gap in pricing between the Russian crude and the crude from the rest of the world. That that gap has also narrowed. So people think that we were having a gala time getting discounted crude, but that crude is no longer discounted. We are at the same level, which is why there is an oil glut. Look at more data. And this is coming from the Ministry of Commerce and Industry, Government of India. It has been on Bloomberg for quite a while now. You look at how high it went in 2022 at almost $120 a barrel. And it's come down to almost the Russian levels. So this is the part people miss. That Russian crude once won discounted heavily and it made sense for us to buy it then. But right now, it
This
makes no
was the
sense.
Russian crude at the lowest here, right?
Yeah. And that is when our imports also peaked out. You look at that gap. Look at that gap between 23 and 24 and look where that gap is right now. That is what people are missing. People think that someone is robbing us of our Russian oil, but that is not how it works. But सबसे तेरे को मजेदार ग्राफ में दिखाऊं, सबसे मजेदार chart. There is a thing called
Mm-hmm.
unknown oilmen, which I also tweeted during the day. Bloomberg came
Mm.
up with this very interesting data, which they did via vessel tracking data, which they keep tracking the tankers and all because they have verticals which are invested in energy coverage.
ये कौन सा तेल है भाई?
ये कहाँ जा रहे थे? Now look at this data.
मैं मैं
In
तो मैं तो
December,
पहले दिन से बोल रहा हूँ ये कहाँ जा रहा है मुझे मालूम है.
हाँ, अब December 21, 2025, China has 1.76 million barrels a day. India gets 1.44 million barrels a day, which is close to what 30% of what we need in a day. And unknown Asian entities is 0.35 million barrels a day, where destination is unknown. Cut to a month later, January 25, 2026, a trade agreement is in final stages. Somewhere, probably backdoor negotiations where we've agreed to cut down our crude purchases. India's million barrels come down to 0.33, but unknown Asian entity is at 1.45. So within 1 month, India's crude imports on paper from Russia are down by a factor of one fifth, but unknown Asian entities imports rise by 5 times. Now, some jokes write themselves, but this is data from Bloomberg. It's not even an Indian publication. For the ones who would say this is to Godi media, Sarkari ne fix kiya
नहीं
hai,
मगर
you know,
अननोन एशिया है ना तो सो लेट मी बी फेयर दे विल से ये पूरे जगह जा रहा है सिर्फ इंडिया नहीं जा रहा.
ठीक है, presume so. You're free to make that assumption, but look at how China's numbers have dropped. They have only halved. China's numbers have not fallen significantly. They've only halved. Ours come down by 80%. From 1.76, China is at 0.84. We are from 1.44 to 0.33. You look at others, same. Unknown Asian entities is where the leap is happening. So, I mean, we can only guess कि क्या हुआ है, क्या नहीं हुआ है. But again, on the question of Russian oil, there are three things that must be remembered. One, we've already shown the United States of America that we go by our economic interest, and that is what we did between 22 to 2026. Number two, the differential between the pricing between the Russian crude and the rest of the world has come down significantly from 2023 peak to now. So that discounted wala factor is no longer available to us because there is an oil glut in the world, as we saw the oil at sea wale graph se. Number three, there is a shadow fleet problem, which the Western publications are also picking up. We don't know where that oil is going. We don't know if it's coming to India. We cannot estimate for sure. No one can estimate for sure. So, Donald Trump, who has taken the decision, the hefty responsibility of monitoring our crude purchases, is free to figure out what these unknown Asian entities are. Okay. And number four, Venezuelan oil or Russian oil or Iraqi oil or oil from Saudi Arabia. For the top office in this government, the only thing that matters is price. Had it been a Congress government, also, they wouldn't have forced double digit inflation on the people of India. Or maybe Congress would have, I don't know. But no sensible government will ever impose double digit inflation on its citizen to appease a president. And Prime Minister Modi doesn't need to appease Donald Trump because Donald Trump is going to be out of office before Narendra Modi, contests for another term. That's how the dynamics are. So these are the dynamics of Russian oil right now, and that is how this entire situation needs to be seen. Now, what's going to happen in the future? Because the differential no longer exists, we might see a dip in purchases from Russia. We might, at least on paper. And so some people will say that, oh, this is the defeat of Narendra Modi. This is, we succumbing to US pressure. But they need to remember what motivated us towards Russian oil in the first place was the discount. And what will motivate us to sort of realign our purchases is also the price. It's that simple. It has nothing to do with any personality cult.
So this chat was also very interesting.
Yes.
ये अननोन एशिया
You
सडनली
see
कहाँ से
you,
पैदा
huh? Suddenly there is a new entity coming up, other unknown, an unknown Asia. That is what I'm saying. Look at the data. Don't go by rhetorics online. The data is telling you something. The shadow fleets are telling you something. And one final factor, for all we know, there is a peace still on the horizon between Russia and Ukraine, which Trump himself might mediate, which might earn him that Nobel. You don't know. Russia might go back to status quo of trading with the Europeans. That could happen. And for all we know, in a few months, we are back to the pre 2022 status quo. But right now, you have a shadow fleet. Right now, you have Indian imports on paper coming down, but some unknown nation entities are picking up a lot of oil. I'm sure that's the thriving economy of Pakistan or South Asia or somewhere with a population of 1.4 billion that wants to have 1.75 billion million barrels of oil per day. So, yeah,
Mhm.
make your assumptions.
Chalo. Now we've done this. Now we move to what? Agriculture?
Yeah, agriculture.
Chalo, batao. What do I put up next?
Agriculture, what do you want to discuss? Let's start with the
First,
agri
let's look
imports
at
from.
absolute numbers. Now, US agri exports to India.
हाँ वो करते हैं.
इनको काजू नहीं खाना है, बादाम नहीं खाना है.
Okay, the first myth that needs to be decimated is that we do not have any agri imports from India. Our goods imports from ये ऐसा क्यों आ रहा है? Our good हाँ
क्या?
our goods नहीं the resolution was the ratio. Our goods imports from the United States are the tune of 40 to 45 billion dollars. This is the number from 2019 to 2023, which saw Joe Biden also with Trump also. I'm specifically putting out numbers that included both the regimes, rather in this case, three regimes, because two regimes, sorry, because people are somehow confusing that we are treating Trump differently from Biden. That is not the notion I want people to have. Now you look at what the imports are: tree nuts, cotton, ethanol, forest products, essentials oil, dairy products, other feeds, meals, seafood products, proteins, and soybeans. Okay. Before there is any confusion on cotton, very important. Our cotton imports from US are less than what we import from Brazil and Australia because some Aam Aadmi Party spokespersons were, creating this wrong narrative कि अपन यूएस से अब कॉटन मंगा के पंजाब का किसान खत्म कर देंगे. No, we import far more from Brazil and Australia. We had cut some concessions on cotton imports because when the tariffs were first announced, we wanted to help our MSMEs, which are importing cotton. But the cotton we import is only around 1/10 or 1/12 of the cotton we grow. So we grow far more cotton, far more than actually we import. So the farmers are in no threat at all. The dry fruits we do not cultivate at all, insignificant cultivation. But you look at the agri imports. In 2023, the total agri and agri related products were 1.8 billion. So from our entire imports from the US of around 45 billion, agri is just 1.8 billion. और उस 1.8 billion में भी 1 billion के सिर्फ हम ड्राई फ्रूट मंगाते हैं. So that's where majority of your imports are. Cotton is merely 237 million. और लोगों ने soybeans पे बहुत बड़े बड़े आर्टिकल लिख दिए हैं अखबारों में already that the farmers would be threatened, their MSP would be devastated, decimated. Please understand all these things. No, hold on. All these things will have a quota. ऐसा नहीं है कि उनको बोलेंगे out dump in India. This is not how it works. There are quotas. Like for Europeans, there are quotas on cars annually of 250,000. There'll be quotas on agricultural products also. So that is how this thing really works.
If people would remember in the last 1 year when I have been talking about this deal and this thing, check what I had predicted and I had said last year. I had said open होगा हम कोटा देंगे इनको. This was negotiated like 5 months ago when I was in like freaking America at that time. तेरे को याद है तुषार, मैं वो डीसी का एक ट्रिप करने के लिए गया था, मैंने तेरे को कॉल भी किया था, तभी मैंने तेरे को बोला था कोटा आएगा इसमें. हाँ, people are pathetic.
यार एक तो
कुछ
ना
नहीं.
लाइव चैट पे यूजीसी के क्वेश्चन मत पूछो, मतलब जरूरी बात कर रहे हैं. We have discussed UGC in a previous podcast.
देखो, आई
Please.
जस्ट वांट टू लेट पीपल नो, मैं बहुत जनरल आदमी हूँ, मेरे स्कूल का नाम भी जनरल एजुकेशन एकेडमी था.
The other don't.
बोल बोल
एक
बोल.
और एक और एक और चार्ट खोल, agri imports from US. Now this is where I compared the volume in the output value. So I want to convince people further that the farmers are not threatened. So let's go for agri imports from US, वो जो chart है with the import value.
ये ले.
Hmm. Now you compare for dry fruits, a billion is the US import value in 23. What is the cultivation output? 83 million. Cotton, as I said, it's just 237 million from the US what we import. Our production value is around 9 billion, and that is at 2023 exchange rate. So every sector you look at, we are either insignificant in that sector, as the example of tree nuts shows you, or we are far dominant in that sector. So people who are saying that the existing commodities will threaten our farmers, they all are fear mongering, all of them.
एक मिनट, ये क्या मैसेज है? ब्लूबेरी सस्ती करो, मुझे ट्राई कर दिया. यार, क्या लोग हैं, क्या क्या
ये
डिमांड आती है,
प्रायोरिटी
मतलब.
प्रायोरिटी सॉर्टेड है भाई.
ट्राई करने, ब्लूबेरीज तो लाओ यार. बाय द वे, उनके लिए गुड न्यूज है, ब्लूबेरीज ही सस्ती हो रही है, ट्राई कर लेना जी भर के. वही वही ला
हाँ
रहे हैं. तो मेरे को बहुत दुख होता है. इज इट लाइक, तू मानेगा नहीं, मतलब तू ये सोच, मैंने तेरे को ये सब चीजें 6 महीने पहले बोली थी ये होने वाली है, और इसमें कोई प्रॉब्लम नहीं है, मगर.
नहीं, प्रॉब्लम ये है ना कि बहुत फियर मॉन्गरिंग हो गई है, इतना झूठ फैल गया है. और अभी एक और
हम्म.
चीज है, ये जो सारी लिस्ट है, इसके कोटास अभी बाहर नहीं आए हैं. इफ
हम्म.
दिस गवर्नमेंट इज सेइंग वील कट डाउन ड्यूटीज और टैरिफ्स ऑन कॉटन, it doesn't mean cotton will flood the Indian market. No, they'll set a specific quota and that is how much it will enter. That's about it. Even with apples, someone said ki you have decided to import apples and that will be the end of industry. No, there is a minimum import price that has been increased. That's gone from I think 50 to 80 rupees. And with all the duty and everything that will be there, it will be around 100 rupees. तो ऐसा नहीं है कि we are giving American imports in the agricultural realm a free run. You know, the whole quota gets changed, the effective rates get changed, and that item by item discussion is pending. So anyone coming up to you and saying हमें पता है ये क्या, हम सस्ता महंगा हो रहा है, तो मैं तुम्हारा काट रहे, वो मत उस चीज में पड़ो. So that is pretty much on agriculture. Our farmers are safe, no opening up of sector, nothing doing.
ओके, नेक्स्ट बता.
एक और है, एक इंडियाज एग्री इंपोर्ट्स फ्रॉम द वर्ल्ड. आई वांट टू ब्रिंग अप द क्वेश्चन ऑफ पंजाब, क्योंकि संयुक्त किसान मोर्चा ने ऑलरेडी प्रोटेस्ट अनाउंस कर दिया है. मुझे ना एक थोड़ा मतलब मैं भी थोड़ा वेंट कर लूं फॉर अ चेंज.
ये ले.
मेक वेंटिंग ग्रेट अगेन.
यस.
नाउ दिस इज फ्रॉम द वर्ल्ड. आवर एग्रीकल्चर imports from the world are around $37 billion. From US alone, it was just 2 billion. 2 billion of the 37 billion for the year 2023. ऊपर तीसरे नंबर पे लिखा है pulses, 2.6 billion. Every year, we like idiots pay $2.6 billion to import pulses from Kushal's second home, also included.
Yeah.
Now, you know what the government in 2024 did? In 2024, the second season of farmer protests began, and they went up to farmers and said, in Punjab, look, we want you to diversify away from rice and wheat. We understand it's difficult, and therefore we want to help you with a 5-year contract with no upper limit. You diversify away from pulses to pulses. The farmers refused. They could have actually replaced the fat import bill we are paying right now, and they could have actually helped their ecological setup. But what did they choose to do? They said no. एंड आज वो कह रहे हैं हमें प्रोटेस्ट करना है, तो तुम हमें बाहर से भी मंगाने नहीं दोगे. हम बाहर से मंगा रहे हैं, हम तुम्हें कह रहे हैं तुम उगा लो, हम 5 साल तुमसे खरीदेंगे, नो अपर लिमिट ऑन प्रोक्योरमेंट. तुम कह रहे हो हमें वो भी नहीं करना, तो तुम भाई चाहते क्या? तुम्हें बस सड़क पे बैठ के ब्लॉकेट करना है. ऐसे नहीं चल सकता. And mind you, the government had intelligence during the second farmer protest also. They'll have even now also. You don't think that they signed this trade agreement without factoring in that some farm unions would try to be, indulge in some adventure. But look at the bills we are paying.
हम्म, नहीं करेंगे वो फार्मर्स. चमन है. चमन चमन. हम्म. और क्या है अभी बता.
अब $500 billion वाला क्वेश्चन एड्रेस करना है.
या वो कहाँ है.
नहीं, लेट्स एक सेकंड. आई जस्ट हैव टू मेक अ कॉल. एक सेकंड.
या इट्स ओके. सो इन द मीन टाइम आई विल टेक अ फ्यू क्वेश्चंस. ठीक है. कुशल भाई आपकी खालिस्तान आई मीन कनाडा टीम शुड नॉट मेक देयर डिसमिसल सो ऑब्वियस. हाँ, मैंने क्या बोला था. टीम को ध्यान से देखना, कनाडा वाली ध्यान से देखना. मैंने बोला था ना, समझदारों को इशारा काफी होता है. हम्म. बोल. या which slide do you want me to put up?
Yeah, so let's talk about the third big concern with this trade deal, which is the $500 billion number. Now, a lot of people are saying that ek to trade surplus wala. A lot of people are saying that $500 billion is an unrealistic figure, right? They're saying that this number is unachievable and that we have been sort of forced to commit to a number that we really can't achieve, which is what your Brahmachalani analysis also hinted at. Ki
Mhm.
we are in a relationship we can't walk out from, but Americans can dump us wherever or whenever they find convenient. तो ये ट्रेड सरप्लस वाला ग्राफ लगाते हैं जरा, इसमें भी नंबर्स हैं.
Trade surplus graph. Okay, where is the trade surplus graph? Mm, there is no trade surplus. Oh, India's trade surplus with the US?
यस, इट इज ट्रेड
Okay.
सरप्लस. तभी तो ट्रम्प चिढ़ा बैठा रहता है हमसे.
Acha. So this graph. No, I meant that's the name of the file, right?
हाँ हाँ हाँ, या दैट्स नेम ऑफ द फाइल.
Here you go.
Now, people said Modi has killed India's, surplus with Americans. It was $20 billion when he took over in FY15. It's $40 billion now. People are saying, how will we achieve the $500 billion number? Now, this is where stupidity is paramount. You think that the import and the export number will remain same throughout. We currently have a trade surplus of $40 billion. Okay. And it will only increase. Our key exports to the US are pharma, electronics, gems and stones, and jewelry, which combined make up for 45% of our exports to the United States. With tariffs down, with we being in a better position to compete with other markets, other countries that have been tariffed much higher, our exports are going to increase. Now, coming to the $500 billion number also, एक और ग्राफ है इंडिया स्मार्टफोन एक्सपोर्ट्स.
Mhm.
क्योंकि इलेक्ट्रॉनिक का मुझे एक और डेटा पॉइंट देना है. People should know that only 3 years ago or 4 years ago, our smartphone exports to the US were absolutely zero, just zero. Today, annually, they are hitting the $20 billion mark. 4 years ago, China's smartphone exports to the US was $70 billion. Today, they are coming down to $20 billion. Because a lot of people are saying, a lot of people are on this assumption कि हमारा जो trade volume or value is stagnant रहेगा. They're not even factoring in the increase in the last few years. You look at how our smartphone exports have, uh, uh, exports have grown to the US. India is now at a very formidable position at around $20 billion. Apple is one of the key players here, which I obviously sort of celebrate. And Apple should be doing more in India. The government should be enabling it to do more, like the Chinese did in the 2010s. But look at where the Chinese share has come down. Where do you think it's going? A bit of it to Vietnam, a bit of it to India. Now, if we have a better tariff situation with the Americans, don't you think Apple have an incentive to produce more in India? So where is this assumption coming from that हमारा ट्रेड सरप्लस तो जाएगा ही जाएगा, जो 10 साल में डबल हुआ है, ठीक है, और हम 500 बिलियन का सामान भी नहीं खरीद सकते और हम सामान उतना बेच भी नहीं सकते. आई जस्ट डोंट गेट इट. दिस इज माई प्रॉब्लम. There is also a chart, a table of India's exports to the US, and let's just sort of come to that finally.
अभी नेक्स्ट कौन सा लगाऊं?
India exports to the US.
There you go.
Now, there is the value and there is the percentage. Look at the first three figures: electronic equipment, pharma, precious stones, metals, and coins. That combined makes up for almost 42, 43%. These are the three sectors which are going to attract the lowest tariff. Probably some of it will be zero. Pharma would be zero. Now, our negotiations start at 18%. But when it comes to the average weighted tariff on Indian goods, finally, it could be in single digits. Because electronic equipment, I don't know, why would he tariff Apple's smartphones being produced in India if we have a trade deal? Metals, coins, jewelry, again, a very thriving industry in the US. Textiles, का अलग एक section है, but that's not big in terms of value or volume. But either way, significant.
No, see, this is where okay. Let me explain this. Bill, articles of apparel not knit or crocheted, matlab basically woven textiles, and articles of apparels ये knit. So basically ये जो तेरा ये जो sector है ना इसमें, this is why I say if you don't know an industry, people should not talk about it. And Brahmacharya made the classic error. He said, "Oh, I'll read his exact quote on textiles. And I need to debunk this because believe me, this is not arrogance. This is confidence. I know this. I spent 20 years in this industry. The damn guy doesn't know anything when he talks about it, right? So he says partial correction here reduces the reciprocal tariff from 25% to 18%, still well above most fair, MFN matlab most favored nation, right? Levels for textile. Nation. Yeah, for like textile and leather. The dude doesn't know anything about this industry. हाथ जोड़ के मैं विनती करता हूं, मत बोला करो जिसके बारे में नहीं पता है. Look at the competing markets from where America buys its textiles from. Compare that with India. India was essentially competing with Pakistan, Bangladesh, Vietnam, Cambodia. अब वो तूने वो जो टैरिफ का वो कौन सा था, वो किधर था, वो कौन सा वाला तेरा चार्ट था?
How tariff stack up, na?
How tariff stack up?
Tariff stacking up. Tariff stacking up.
No, तो साले इतने सारे चार्ट्स है ना. हाँ, टैरिफ स्टैकिंग अप. सो आई एम जस्ट, हाँ वो ही है. सो मैंने तेरे को कौन से देश बोले थे? वियतनाम, बांग्लादेश, पाकिस्तान, कंबोडिया. ठीक है, पाकिस्तान 19 है. ठीक है, अभी इंडोनेशिया थोड़े शूज और ये सब करता है, वो 19 है. मलेशिया 19 है, कंबोडिया 19 है, वियतनाम 20 है, बांग्लादेश 20 है. कैन अच्छा, यूके और ईयू हमसे नीचे है. फॉर लाइक ऑनेस्टली, मतलब कौन सा गांजा मारते हैं ये लोग?
अच्छा, कुछ
ईयू
लोग
कपड़े बनाता है.
नहीं, कुछ लोग तो ये भी कह रहे हैं कि वियतनाम और हमारा तो 1% का ही डिफरेंस है, उस 1% में हम कितनी कंपेटिटिवनेस कर लेंगे. दिस इज वेयर दे डू नॉट अंडरस्टैंड दैट आइटम बाय आइटम, कोटा बाय कोटा, ऑल दीज थिंग्स आर येट टू बी डिस्कस्ड.
या
एंड द कॉमर्स मिनिस्टर हैज हिमसेल्फ सेड दिस कि अभी तो हम और नेगोशिएट करेंगे, there will be further discussions and it will be taken care of. So I don't know where this fear mongering is coming from.
Point number 2, अगर इन लोगों का क्रिटिसिज्म ये है ना कि इंडिया में इलेक्ट्रिसिटी पर यूनिट कॉस्ट इंडस्ट्रियल बहुत हाई है, मैं तुम्हारे साथ हूं. इन लोगों का क्रिटिसिज्म अगर ये है कि इंडिया में वाटर प्रोडक्ट ओवरऑल ओवरऑल दूसरे कॉस्ट थोड़े हाई है, और अगर हम हमारी लेबर पॉलिसी जो 300 तक की लिमिट है, अगर हमको टेक्सटाइल में रियल में काम करना है तो हमको ये 300 की लिमिट को टेक्सटाइल के लिए 1000 करना पड़ेगा, तो रियल में काम होगा
हम्म।
टेक्सटाइल में। अगर तुम्हारे क्रिटिसिज्म चाहिए, क्यों, यू नो व्हाई आई रिस्पेक्ट समवन अ लॉट, लाइक जग्गी, जग्गी का आर्टिकल देख, उसने क्या बोला है,
हाँ।
ये ट्रेड डील हो गई है, ये ट्रेड डील हो गई है, अब ये जो हमारे इंटरनल रिफॉर्म्स हमको और जो कर रहे हैं ना वो करो। I would urge
इकोनॉमिस्ट
everyone to go and read that article.
Economist published an article and I'll read out that blurb someone sent me. मैं मतलब सड़क पे गिर गया था पढ़ के ना कि इकोनॉमिस्ट ये लिख रहा है इतनी प्यारी बातें. I'll just read it out. Hold on. Someone sent it to me on WhatsApp. Where do these things goes when you need them the most?
मेरा मैसेज पढ़ ले
Narendra
प्राइवेट वाला,
Modi.
सिर्फ हंसी करके निकाल देना।
Narendra Modi could be, this is from The Economist, by the way. Narendra Modi could be forgiven for bearing a grudge towards farmers. Twice the Indian Prime Minister has attempted much needed rural modernization, and twice he has ended up with egg on his face. At the beginning of his first term, he was forced to withdraw a land acquisition law after his government was branded a Sood Put Ki Sarkar. His second got bogged down by year-long protest in which a small but noisy group of farmers from the north and the west resisted reforms to agricultural markets. This is what Economist is writing. This is what London is thinking of the Indian Prime Minister and his reforms. And they would write all this now. अब उनको नहीं लगेगा 250 मिलियन लोग बैठे हैं सड़क पे, और CNN की जो हेडलाइन थी, because now the reforming of Indian agriculture sector actually makes our sector in a position to compete with them. Let's be very clear about one thing. We are not opening up a farming and dairy sector because we are a labor intensive country when it comes to agriculture. Half of our population, formally, informally, still dependent on agriculture, and it delivers to us only 1/6 of the GDP, when it should be the reverse of it. That only 1/6 of the population, or probably even lesser, is engaged in agriculture, and it contributes significantly to the GDP with the kind of landmass we have, with the kind of diversity we have. That's not happening. अभी किसी ने लिखा हुआ था, I think it was Shivani on CNN. She said, I went to Australia, and she's a sports journalist. And she said, I had some protein milk there and it was so awesome and it was so rich in taste and, in terms of its nutrient value. And when I came to India and I felt cheated, which is how anyone would feel. You live in Canada. You can give us an honest assessment of how different and how radically different the dairy products are. So we also have to understand that there is a group of farmers in India that are unwilling to reform. You tell them that you're going to buy for them for the next 5 years. I gave you the example of pulses. They won't do that. And that is the reason we're not opening up a farming and dairy sector. It's a commentary on us, not on the rest of the world. So that is something we have to introspect about. Our government has tried, this government has tried. They have tried pushing them away. But I think the only way some farmers will stop is when the land will tell them that we do not have the water. The message will itself come from the land कि पानी नहीं बचा है इसमें, मिट्टी में उतनी न्यूट्रिएंट्स नहीं बचे कि क्रॉप संभाल पाए. दैट इज द डे आई फियर फॉर दोस फार्मर्स. एक और इंटरेस्टिंग चीज थी 500 बिलियन वाले नंबर में जॉइंट स्टेटमेंट है, दे बी पिकिंग अप मोर जीपीयूज and a lot of equipment, hardware equipment for the data centers. And there is a tax break in the budget for data centers until 2047. Now, one, it helps us with the data localization efforts to some extent. Second, it also will help the software industry create more products aligned to the future when it comes to exports. So our service exports will also benefit. It's not a to and fro ki ek tarafa hi cheezein hongi. There will also be the benefit to the service industry. Number three, and I wanted to emphasize this point, we are assuming that the nature of exports and imports between India and the US will remain the same. The US right now is on a war spree to sort of figure out its entire rare earth equation. We have started making, some progress in that direction. It will take us a few years. The US might be in a position to better access that technology. Tomorrow, you may have a situation where we are importing equipment from the United States essential to mining and processing of rare earths, which we might find them here. They might help us with the, technology which is otherwise restricted by IPs and patents and stuff like that. So the nature of exports and imports between India and the United States will also change over time. Rare earths will be very important. TSMC is now starting to build in Arizona. So if Apple continues to produce in India and upscales its production, you might have chips coming in from the United States to India. That will also add to your $500 billion count. So at this point, no one can predict how the imports and exports will actually evolve with time. But everyone has already written the obituary of a deal that has not even been finalized yet. And I've shown you enough data points to prove that all of it is fear mongering, be it agriculture, be it the Russian crude part, be it the 2.4 versus 18% part, be it the $500 billion part. And there
I
are
think
Boeings also to manage.
what has happened is when initially when they took it up to 50%, and the whole idea was we will buy whatever oil we want to buy. A lot of that rhetoric had come. Whether we like it or not, a lot of that rhetoric had come. Now here's the thing. It doesn't help when the commerce minister is asked one question, he deflects it to the Minister of External Affairs,
Hmm.
and the Minister of External Affairs is asked, he deflects it to the Commerce Minister. It doesn't bode well. I think what the government of India should be very open and honest is it should come to the people of India. It should tell the people of India, listen, at first we decided that we're going to eat the tariffs. But then later on, we did the math. And when we did the math and when we realized that if we get this reduced from 50% to effectively 18%, then we end up competing very well in these areas, these areas, these areas, these areas. And if in that case, one of the conditions is buying lesser Russian oil, but we gain in economics over here. And if they would have gone and told people like this, I think the people will understand. My criticism of the government has always been that there is a horrifying communication crisis with this government, and they just think we'll waltz things through. We'll just waltz through it every time. Why? Because the political capital is very high, they tend to win many elections, and that's been my grouse with this government. It is pathetic in communication. Secondly, another thing the government has not been able to communicate very well is, listen, what did the Americans give in? It is not just India that gave in things. The Americans also gave in a few things. My problem is the government has woefully failed to even tell people what the Americans gave in. The Americans have given in a lot of things. The Americans, I can tell you with some certainty because I was following this negotiation behind the scenes for the longest time. And I know the three people who were doing this negotiation for us. Okay. I'm not going to take their names publicly, but I have given you the names privately. ये नाम है, तो
Hmm.
प्राइवेट चैट में पढ़ ले. ये तीन लोग कर रहे थे. मैं तेरे को कॉन्फिडेंस से बोल रहा हूं. आई नो ये तीन लोग कर रहे थे. These are seasoned bureaucrats. They know their shit. ये तीन जन है. और तू भी चेक कर लेना.
Hmm.
These are seasoned bureaucrats. These are good people who are. We had literally put our best people in the negotiation. They really wanted the dairy sector. I can tell you they did. We did not budge. We are like, लो मार डालो जो भी है, हम नहीं खोलेंगे. हम जीएमओ क्रॉप्स नहीं करने देंगे तुमको. नहीं करने देंगे. हम नहीं लाने देंगे. तुम कुछ भी कर लो, 500% मार लो, हम नहीं करने देंगे. तीसरी बात, मैं अगेन बोल रहा हूं, मैं ऑल सीरियसनेस के साथ बोल रहा हूं, वी डिड नॉट से वी विल मेक इट जीरो द रशियन ऑयल. If it leads to inflation in our market, we will start picking up Russian oil in whatever way we can. If it is what we need. This has been
People have.
clearly
Hmm.
communicated to the Americans.
People have forgotten what happened in 2022. They have just forgotten. They've forgotten what the world was like. Nirmala Sitaraman had her third budget thrown away by the Russia-Ukraine war, and we were staring at the possibility of oil touching 150, $140 a barrel. We have already disproven this theory. I don't understand what the fear mongering is about, honestly. दूसरी चीज, I don't know what people were honestly expecting from the deal. There are certain aspects on which we still depend on the US. We have a huge workforce there. There's the whole software industry. And we also have to look at the prospects of a software industry in the future. We need their hardware for our data centers. We need to create, I mean, a lot of ecosystems here in terms of software and AI and all stuff like that. One more interesting thing, in the budget, there was a 40,000 crore outlay for electronic equipment. So I think we can start with the assumption that the PLI, up for renewal next month, will be renewed in some form. So that also aligns with the trade deal, that also aligns with what the budget said, that also aligns with how the success of the PLI on the electronic front has been, electronic equipment and manufacturing. So I think all in all, it's a decent trade deal. But you have to understand these things evolve with time. They have a nature of their own. You can't predict tomorrow if World War III starts, all these agreements, all these deals will be up in the air because every nation would be squandering for whatever resources are left. That is how the world works. Externalities होती हैं, सब agreement धरे के धरे रह जाते हैं. Abhi, these are the good times for the world. We have an oil glut, a problem we thought we'll never see when we were young, but we have an oil glut right now. There is far more oil at the sea in tankers. I don't know where the shadow fleet is going. So a lot of things are happening. I am sort of disappointed in people who are being too bearish on this deal. I think that is a very, very uh, horrific approach.
Let's assume, see, again, I'll repeat all the points. Let's assume um the oil bit will do something to us. Listen, we import 90% of our oil. 90% of our oil. The one, again, the place where you gotta push India is, you gotta push India to go nuclear. Has this
Yeah.
government done that? Yes. Check the last time. So, check one of the past podcasts. This government, in I think in the previous budget, one of the biggest pushes they did, not this one, the previous one, was nuclear. We have to go nuclear. We have to um, um, reduce our dependence on oil. It has to be a combination of nuclear, solar, hydro, whatever, how many other options you want. Although I'm not a fan of solar, but it is what it is. Say, um, two, what do you want the government to do? You would have said, this is the same Rahul Gandhi who said, "हमारा textile sector suffer कर रहा है." Although I did not agree with that, I thought the Hong Kong route was there; it was very viable. Gems and jewelry, I don't know. Maybe they were suffering a little more, so I'm going to hold back on that. But the point is, what do you want the government to do? Is my question. What should the government do? Buy Russian oil and do that. Okay, they were not going to budge. What do you want to do then? Life is a trade-off.
वो कमलेश जी ने बहुत अच्छा लिखा था ना, a trade deal is not to do it, but no, a trade deal is not a duel, but to do it. He wrote that line pretty well. It stuck with me.
Yeah, Kamlesh.
But again, I want to repeat this. 18% is where we start our negotiations. The effective average tariff on Indian imports to the US would be far lesser at the end of it.